Good afternoon, everyone. Dear friends and colleagues, I'm so excited because tomorrow I will be speaking at the Foreign Languages Forum, and my theme is engaging young learners. So we are going to delve into the whole procedure of accommodating and adopting approaches to stimulate their young minds and have them embed key vocabulary and basic sentence structures at a very young age. Now, the thing is that many of you have sent me overwhelmingly positive messages about my speech, and some of you can't attend. So I decided to do this rehearsal posted online on my channel for your convenience. And at the end of the video, I have a few surprises for you, some things that you can download for your personal use throughout the school year. Having said this, let's share the presentation and get things rolling. Here we are, engaging young minds. Okay, so ELT approaches for young learners, and we will be addressing 4 educational approaches. Total physical response for linking language with movement, play-based learning for encouraging natural language use, sensory play as we engage the senses in vocabulary acquisition, and finally, Realia for tangible learning. Let's start off with total physical response. As you can understand from the title alone, it has to do with teaching English through physical movement, okay? And it was first developed in the 1960s by James Asher, and it's quite effective when we want our students to utilize vocabulary and basic sentence structure formations. Having said this, the key concepts of total physical response, I dare say, based on my own experience as a student at a very young age, I was more prone to responding to vocabulary than actually using my verbal capacity to do so. What do I mean by this? I was very anxious and stressed when I was a kid in class. I had some of my classmates that would raise their hands all the time and they would answer, my teacher's questions. What is this? How do we say this? And even though I knew the answer, I wouldn't raise my hand. I was afraid of being mocked, or I was doubting myself, even though I knew the word. So this approach actually helps us cater to a stress-free environment. And we'll see how this is done through our physical movements. Now, the thing is that by repeatedly applying these physical movements in class, you actually have better chances at retaining the information, and you will be better equipped at comprehending the materials at hand. So if we're going to look into a few procedures about what total physical response entails, first of all, let's talk about basic commands. This is something that you do already in class, your teachers. So body parts, you ask your students to point at various parts of your body. Okay, nose, mouth, hands, leg, etc. So pointing is essential in any kind of language acquisition. Classroom objects, we do the same thing there. Point at the book, point at the door, you get the gist. So basic actions. Now, here's where things start to get interesting because we are talking about total physical response. If you tell someone to stand up, he's moving, he understands, he acknowledges your command. If you tell this person to sit down, he will do so again. Many a time in class, when we actually issue this order, okay, this command to others, everyone will follow suit and the students will try to copy and mimic each other's actions, thus catering to the whole idea of total physical response. Now, let's take this a step further. Daily routines. You have classroom routines, open your book or open your bags, use a pencil, write your name, and then we start off with other vocabulary because you're delving into new territory for the kids. They start off by learning the days of the week, numbers, colors, and then they start learning things like morning routine. So you wear your clothes, you brush your teeth. Now, keep this in mind because we might not have the objects in front of us, but we want to do the specific action for them to see. So when you say, I brush my teeth, you use this horizontal movement of left and right, and they acknowledge it. They will follow suit. They will mimic your actions. And that's how they will actually combine the idea and associate the movement with the word, thus helping them assimilate the whole concept of brushing your teeth. Keep that picture in mind, the one with the toothbrush, because we're going to use it later on. Now, let's take it a step further. Storytelling with actions. I love stories. At the end of this video, you will find links to a handout. It's about 10 pages with various ideas for actions, stories, songs that you can use that can be accommodated through total physical response. One of the songs in the handout is this one. Okay, it's a story, and then, we're going to work on the song of the Three Little Pigs. First of all, I like associating actions with not only verbally as a command, but with physical actions. So the Three Little Pigs is ideal for this. You have a picture of the three houses, and you have to pretend to build the house with various materials. You have the students mimicking building, and you can associate new words. So you're like, what can I actually consider for this lesson? So we have the Three Little Pigs. We can have an axe to cut wood, chop wood, okay, carry the wood, etc. These are simple words. They're 3 or 4 letter words in most cases. And what we want our kids to do, we offer them visual stimulation. So you can have a picture of a forest on the board. You can draw it or you can find a picture online. It's quite easy to find pictures, especially royalty-free ones, for your use in class. So you point at the picture, the one that we see here on our screen. This is a forest. It has trees, and we want wood. So you then show them the picture of an axe. It's a 3-letter word if we're talking about the British spelling. If it's the US, it's a 2-letter word. And then you actually go to the whiteboard and place your hands on the axe, on the image, as if you're holding it. So this is an axe. Okay, the students will follow your actions. They will actually copy you, and they're going to be swinging the axe. And you'll hear them actually repeat it. It's an axe. Okay, so they're associating the verbal presentation of the word with the physical movement that I just implemented. Then you can actually stretch the axe and you say, I am chopping. I chop. Okay, the movement, chop. They start to understand that chop has to do with the wood. So then you show them this picture. You chop with an axe, or you can chop wood with the axe. Where can we find wood? In the forest. Okay, thus, having done this, they start associating the pictures with your physical movement, the verbal association with what they have just seen. It only took me literally about a minute, maybe 2 minutes to find 4 pictures. It's quite simple just by doing a search, either in free pick or anything else. I'm not endorsing anything. It's just that there's so many platforms. This one actually has a lot of royalty-free pictures suitable for classrooms. Now, what I did with my students, you have to use your imagination and you have to role play a lot. What did I do in my case? Well, I had 2, 3 of my students and I told them, use the axe and chop wood. So they sat, next to the whiteboard, next to the picture of the forest, and they were chopping and they were having fun. And then I told the other students to carry the wood. And I told them, here, I'm going to give you the wood. So as the teacher, I would carry the wood. I would actually give the wood to them to carry. So I was like, here you are. And I gave them 2 or 3 logs, all of this imaginary. And they were like, ugh, and they were struggling. And I'm like, are you okay? And they're like, yes, I'm okay. And then I was teasing them, can you carry more? Here's a few more. So by doing these imaginary, movements, they started, acknowledging what I was saying. It was easier for them to understand the English language, even though they don't even know how to write most of the words. Now, the funny part is that I tried to use my movements of body language to intrigue their and stimulate their minds. So I was like, are you strong? And my students were like, yes, I'm strong. Okay, I'll give you 10 pieces of wood. And I was doing the same action over and over. And they were going to the corner, unpiling the wood. They were running back to me as I was giving them the wood. And I started teasing them. I'm not strong. I'm not strong. I'm weak. And they started, associating even more vocabulary. Then I switched the kids around. The first group started carrying the wood. The second one was chopping. And this was funny. It was entertaining. And some of my kids, they were like this. And I'm like, you're strong. You're strong. And they were like, I'm strong. So it helps a lot to associate physical movements, associating them with words and intriguing their minds. Now, since we're doing the Three Little Pigs, we should definitely use a song with actions. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? I find it amusing because a lot of the times, my students might sing this song and they don't even know what the words mean, but they start, getting some hints. So, who's afraid of the big bad wolf? And I'm like, are you afraid? Are you afraid of the big bad wolf? And some of them are like, yes. And then one of my students might pop up and he's like, no, I'm not afraid. I'm and he's like, oh, you're brave. You're brave. And he's like, yes, I'm brave. I'm not afraid. He was looking for the word. And I'm like, you're brave. And so this is how they associate, body movement, the body language with verbal association. So they mimic various actions such as blowing or running. And the whole idea is to have fun. I usually take the role of the big bad wolf. I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. And they respond, not by the hair of your chinny chin chin. I like the fact that they're using their finger, to actually, reject the claims of the wolf that, we're not taking this. Okay, no, no, no. And they're using, their body movement in order to express their feelings. And this is what I want in class. Now, directions and movement. In the handout that I have, at the end of this presentation, there are a lot of games that you can implement. I like follow the leader. I actually use a variation of follow the leader in class. So we actually line up. I'm at the head of the line, and I start, making small paces, and everyone else follows me in a line. And I'm like, turn left. So I say it and I do it at the same time. I turn left and I start walking. Turn right. They follow me. I turn right. They also, turn right as well. I might jump forward. They will follow as well. Let's take 2 steps and stop. 1, 2, stop. So this is follow the leader. At some point, I might jump out of line and I tell the student behind me to follow my commands as the rest of the students are following the student who is, actually in the first place. So I'm like, move forward, turn right, turn left, but without my physical guidance. They just hear me verbally because they've associated, my body language previously. If the student in front makes a mistake, okay, then the student goes to the back of the line and the student who is second will, take the student's place. And I will continue issuing commands after having seen me, myself, execute these movements. So it's quite fun, to say the least. Now, interactive activities. You can ask them to find something blue. They'll scatter across the class. They will grab it. They'll bring it to you. They might not know what it is, but they acknowledge because you've already worked on colors. Can you see anything that starts with a letter B? They might find something like a bag, a book. Once one of my students came up to me and he was empty-handed. Did you find something that is, that starts with a letter B? And he was like, your bag, and pointed at my bag, which was actually next to my desk. It was amazing. And, other questions like something that can open and close, a bag, the door, the window, and so many other things. In the handout that I have, ready for you, there are actually, a few ideas you can use in class. You can also take it to the next level, prepositions. You can play a game in class, put the book on the table. They actually follow, your orders. Place the pencil under your chair. It's amazing as you see students executing these commands, which means they acknowledge, they understand what you're saying in English, even if they haven't spoken these sentences yet. But they will, they definitely will. Sequence activities. First, walk to the door, then open it, and finally wave to the class. Even if the student doesn't say anything, you see him executing these physical responses, these movements flawlessly. He walks to the door, he opens it, then waves, and he might say bye. But he sees this as a game, and that's what we want. We want the students to enjoy what they're doing. Now, let's move on to the second category. The second category is play-based learning. Play-based learning is an approach. Okay, as you can understand, students will use playtime as a way of exploring, learning, and practicing their new skills. Now, there are two types of play-based learning. The first one is structured. The second one is unstructured. Now, you might be asking me, isn't this the same thing as gamification? I've held many webinars and I spoke at conferences about gamification last year. And you can actually find materials on my personal blog, katherinereilly.blog, that have to do with gamification. There is a difference between gamification and play-based learning. Gamification has predetermined objectives, and you have to do something, a specific challenge. You have to accumulate points, rewards, and you're working on a specific skill. It is a game, you're having fun. But play-based learning, you also encourage initiatives, how to express yourself, and abstract engagement. Okay, because in a game, in gamification, you have to repeat yourself many times in order to rank first, okay, or to achieve a goal, or to actually, reach the finish line of an English language teaching game. So if you need extra materials for gamification, you can scan the QR code below, or just visit my site, katherinereilly.blog. Now, since we said play-based learning, you have structured and unstructured play. Structured, as you can understand, has to do with helping the children learn through a guided environment. We're actually in charge, the teachers. But if it's unstructured, you just give them the theme of what they're supposed to do and encourage them to create, to be creative, to explore, and to develop their skills socially. So, for example, if you give them a specific list at the supermarket, as the theme, okay, and you want them to do a specific order or buy something, that's structured. But if you tell them you're in a supermarket, I want to see you shopping, okay, then the students specifically try to express themselves in any fashion they want. Oh, I like those apples. How much do they cost? And the other student will reply to like $5 each. Oh my God, that's too much, etc. Let them role play and be social while doing so. And having led to this, okay, we want them to actually work on both sets of, approaches. Both structured and unstructured are both useful, okay, in this capacity. And I usually start with structured, and once they get the hang of it, I then focus my lesson on unstructured. So I might start with a scenario at a museum, and I ask them, one student to sell tickets, and the other one is the one who's going to purchase. In the unstructured, I might ask them, to imagine that they're in the museum and talking about the exhibits without guiding them at all. Okay, so some recommendations for structured, you have imaginary settings like a supermarket, a restaurant, a museum, story time with props like puppets and costumes. This is something that they can implement, especially if you're having a puppet on your hand or wearing a costume and you're acting. What does this remind us of? And it is at this point that I want to stress the fact that, yes, it actually also involves total physical response. What do we want? I stated at the beginning of this presentation that we will be looking at four educational approaches. They are different, but they also complement each other. And this is what we want. So we're actually implementing total physical response with play-based activities. If we're talking about unstructured, free RPG, imaginary settings, constructive play, they can actually use Legos. You ask them, what are they doing? What are they making? Now, when we're talking about educational approaches, the third one that we will be delving into has to do with the senses. What kind of senses are you aware of? I'll allow 5 seconds. Think about the senses. If you've thought about these senses, you're actually right. There are 5 senses: touch, hearing, sight, smell, and taste. Now, this is the part where I'm going to say that we will be focusing on sensory play. Sensory play and all educational approaches actually need a presentation alone to further get into the details and about the potential that it accommodates. Sensory play is a strategy that you engage the senses of a student and you connect words to their sensory experiences. How do we do this? Well, the whole approach has to do with understanding and retaining the new vocabulary words. Long story short, you can actually focus on a specific theme to reinforce the meaning of a word. If your students are learning the word rough, okay, you can actually find a piece of sandpaper. It's quite cheap. Maybe the school owner might have some, or maybe you might have at home. You bring the piece of sandpaper. You can show them pictures on the board. You can actually give them, afterwards the sandpaper, but we want them to touch it. Okay, that's what we want, sensory play. In this specific example, we have touch, okay, and we are also observing it. So we have touch by skin. You also have the visual stimulation through the eyes. And these are the things that we want from our students to start, using their senses. By touching it, they'll understand that, wow, what is this? Where do we use this? Because they're young, they might not know what sandpaper is used for. And you might explain to them that we use it to make something smooth. So you actually take advantage of rough, and then you show how it works on a rough surface, and then afterwards they can touch it. And you say, this is smooth, okay, by touching, the surface of a table, and then you let them touch the sandpaper, this is rough. Okay, now their mind will associate this feeling with what they just touched. There are 5 senses. I usually work on 1 or 2 every time in class in the beginning. Later on, I can make, various combinations. So some ideas that I also have in the handout, you can try out textured objects in the first lesson. Smooth, rough, soft, hard, bumpy. What senses have we actually worked on this time? Touch and sight. Then you have scented words like citrus, refreshing, and this is where, other senses start playing a role, smell and sight. Taste and description. You have sweet, sour, salty, bitter. What kind of senses have we engaged? Taste and touch. Now, a lot of my colleagues say that they use sensory play without working on hearing because they say that, oh, we have a lot of listening exercises. Let's focus on the other things that they don't usually work on in class, like smell or touch. But that's a mistake because we want them to work on their critical skills. Having said this, if they hear a screech, you can ask your students, what was that? So one of your students might say, it's a baby. The other one might say, it's a cat. And you're like, nope, it's the sound of a tire. Okay, there's so many different approaches to language learning, and we want them also to use their minds, critical thought, to analyze what they just experienced. So yes, hearing must also be implemented and incorporated into the lesson. Now, these are just a few examples. You can find many on your own on the internet, in my handout, of course, and you can use them throughout the school year. Now, you might be asking me, isn't total physical response the same as sensory play? Well, no, and I'll explain why. Total physical response relies on physical movement, while sensory play focuses on exploring and developing your sensory experiences and motor skills. Yes, if we're talking about physical movement, you can move, okay. There might be some touching, included, which is one of the senses, but we want our students to explain how they feel. Okay, this is hot, this is cold, this is smooth, this is soft. Okay, it's not only touching or moving. So in this case, I have, for example, a feather in class. I give the feather to the student, and the student, strikes the feather on his or her skin. So how do you feel? And they try to express themselves. So you can teach them an adjective, the feather is soft. Or if they find it ticklish, you can say the feather tickles you, and you smile and you're kind of giggling. This way they understand what the feather's effect is on the individual. This is the last educational approach for today, Realia for tangible learning. And I would like to explain a few things about Realia. When we're talking about real life objects that are used in the classroom, to make learning more concrete and engaging. You have, for example, a basketball, okay, and your student is learning the word basketball. You give the student the basketball, he's holding it, he sees the color, he acknowledges what he's holding, the bumps and everything, that it's full of air. But the student is holding the basketball, thus associating the word with his experience of holding the item. Now, there are a lot of students that are kinesthetic learners. What is a kinesthetic learner? It's a learner, okay, who actually needs to incorporate movement and, seeing an object, touching it, and working with it in order to properly, associate the word with the whole experience that he is having. Where can it be used? You can use it when you are talking about classroom objects, okay, or when you are talking about various, currencies, postcards, clothing, when we're talking about cultural awareness, shopping scenarios, traveling. I find this so interesting because you can actually bring some currency from abroad and, you can actually combine cultural awareness with the shopping scenarios that you are somewhere in Italy or you're in France or Brazil and you have money from that country and you want to use that money to shop for a specific item that can only be found in that country. And you can, combine various, themes. Countable and uncountable nouns. Many a time I would bring, oil or sugar and a few apples, fruit that they can count. These can be counted. This can't be counted. Coffee can't be counted. It's not that difficult to bring a few items with you. Some of the items are available at your schools. I mean, if you go to your school's kitchen, you can find, some coffee or sugar or whatever. And they actually associate all of these ideas, everything that they see and touch, everything that can move with the word that they're trying, to um, integrate in their learning of the English language. Finally, there are also demonstrations. I like it when we're using Realia to demonstrate something. It could be an electronic gadget. You can actually have a cooking session in class. I'm not saying to burn the whole school down. I usually have, actually used a few cooking recipes in class that do not have to do with the use of anything that is hot. Okay, it could be like something like a sandwich or maybe honey on, some bread. It could be anything simple. So don't worry about having your students exposed to things like sharp, knives or something that can burn them. Okay, now, remember when I talked about the toothbrush in the beginning? We were talking about total physical response, the movement of the toothbrush. You can actually bring a toothbrush in this case, and you can take it a step further. I'm brushing my teeth. Okay, and then you can bring them a hairbrush. Most of us have a hairbrush and they're like two brushes. Yes. So I brush my hair. You can have a hairbrush or you can have the toothbrush and they see that brush. Okay, it has to do with this movement. One is for teeth, the other is for hair. And you can also bring a comb with you and you can say, I'm combing my hair. So even though they might not know how to spell the words, they actually start learning how to use the words, okay? And that's why we want them to hold things. This will help them associate the movement, the purpose with what they're doing and what they need to do in their everyday lives. So once again, another difference, isn't Realia the same as sensory play? Well, both of them do have interaction, but Realia is about using the objects to teach language directly. But with sensory play, we want them to express themselves. It's the whole idea of feelings and experience, and both of them can be used, okay, even in association with each other. And it's very important to acknowledge that we want students to express themselves in any way they deem fit. A student might not want to express his feelings, okay, when brushing his or her hair, but he will better acknowledge it by holding the brush. Another student might say, I love brushing my hair. I like the feeling. See, my hair is soft because they learned the word, earlier. And that's the whole idea. Let students express themselves in any way they want. So having said this, experiment. Out of the 4 educational approaches, maybe all of them might work with your students, maybe not. Maybe some of them, maybe a combination. Try, combine, different techniques, repeat them, because repetition is a part of this whole experience. And something that you might have tried, in one procedure might not work, in another one. Depends on the student, what they're interested in. And of course, all of this will cater to fostering a more diverse and accepting learning environment, in one in which your students will start prospering and feeling welcome, allowing them to express themselves. Okay, so you can send me an email on katherinereilly1@yahoo.com. Yes, it's an old email. I can't change it because hundreds of people have it. KatherineReilly.blog is my educational blog. You can find materials there, whatever you need. You will also find the PowerPoint presentation, the one I just showed you. You will also find a certificate of participation since you followed this presentation till the end. Thank you so much. And of course, you will find the handout material that has to do with all these wonderful ideas that you can use throughout the school year. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the Foreign Languages Forum. Take care, everyone.